Throughout American history, urban freeways have been an extremely controversial topic. These massive highways were built through major cities during the 1960s and 70s, cutting through poor and often predominantly African American and minority neighborhoods, simply for the sake of land value. This is a rough spot for the U.S.'s interstate system, which is normally seen as an impressive engineering feat and development for the country. With that, we can move to Baltimore, Maryland, the topic of today's video. This is a very historic city within the Northeast megalopolis, with an especially controversial freeway history. This is the most visible on the I-70 corridor, where a major interstate just abruptly ends directly after an interchange, with a small park and ride and a turnaround. It looks like it was obviously meant to continue into the city. But it's also seen on the Franklin-Mulberry Expressway just west of the downtown. A very short 1.4 mile freeway that seems to disappear as fast as it got there. It has an extremely interesting and controversial history. So today we're going to talk about the short portion of US 40 that's been deemed by Baltimore residents as the highway to nowhere. Before we continue talking about that though, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. We make geography content like this every weekend. So if you appreciate my content and want to show any support, please subscribe because it helps me out a ton as I try to grow. Thank you. So let's start by backing up and just looking at this highway. It's located directly to the west of the downtown, mostly within the Harlem Park neighborhood. In the west, it starts at a metro station, where Franklin Street separates to go around the parking lot. After a few blocks of this, it exits off of Franklin Street and Mulberry Street into the center of a 1 block wide area. It goes around 10 blocks east like this, before there's 2 more ramps with access to Franklin and Mulberry Street. This is meant to serve MLK Boulevard, which passes under the highway and doesn't have a good entrance onto the highway, at the actual ending of the freeway, which is a bit farther down at the intersection with Pennsylvania Avenue and Green Street. So right off the bat, we notice a few things. First of all, obviously it's only 1.4 miles long, which is extremely short. You almost never see freeways this length. And with the way it goes from a normal road into a freeway and back into a normal road, paints a picture that there's obviously something up with this highway. Second thing is how it disconnects neighborhoods so much. Obviously, freeways have served as large dividers of neighborhoods and cities for over 50 years now. But the way this one really just flattened out an entire block makes it feel even wider than it needs to be. This is something else that has a reason that we'll get into shortly, but it's a very clear issue that affects the city negatively. You don't need to know any history to understand that. But finding out why this highway was built where it is, in the way that it is, we have to start by going all the way back to the 1950s to look at a very interesting part of America's freeway history, the Yellow Book. Now, the Yellow Book is a book from 1955 that detailed the, at the time, proposed interstate highway system. It showed the proposed map of the entire system in a detailed way. But it also went city to city to show the proposed map for all the urban freeways. You can look at this for almost all major cities, including Baltimore. So in 1955, when the book was published, the proposal for Baltimore was simple. There would be a beltway around the city, which ended up being I-695. Then there would be one north-south interstate passing through the downtown, and one east-west interstate passing through the downtown. Now this is where it gets a bit more complicated. The north-south route ended up turning into I-83 in the north and I-395 in the south. They don't connect, but they both serve the downtown on either side. Now for the east-west interstate, that's where we find our issue. So originally, I-70's main numbering was meant to end at the interchange with I-695. Then a spur route, I-170, would continue from there into the downtown, passing through and connecting back up with the beltway on the other side. This sounded like an easy plan, right? Well, no, not at all. There was immediate opposition to I-170 through the inner city. See, this highway would pass through Leakin Park and the Gwynn Falls area, the largest park in the city and an extremely important recreational area for Baltimore. And when I say it would pass directly through the park, that is exactly what I mean. Now, obviously this would be a problem from the start. Planners knew this. Looking at a document from 1971 titled Baltimore Interstate Highway System 3A, we see the city's plan to combat this. They had a compensatory development plan that they hoped would be enough for residents. They planned to build new swimming pools, baseball fields, tennis courts, a new day camp area, and more recreational facilities. They tried their hardest to make sure people knew that they were trying to minimize harm to the park and the historic areas. Now, the park wasn't the only problem. Even if they could make it through, they would still be flattening blocks upon blocks of residential areas between the park and the downtown. This is where we get to the Franklin-Mulberry Expressway and actually talk about its really sad history. Because what ended up happening is that it was easier to get a highway that flattened and disconnected poor communities built than it was to approve it through the park. This was covered in the 3A document as well. They stated that a substantial number of residential structures would have to be cleared, and their justification for this was that many of the structures were already abandoned or deteriorated beyond repair. This is technically true, but there were still many people and functioning buildings still there. The freeway was to be depressed below grade, and they planned it to flatten an entire block for a couple of reasons. The first reason was for the planned rail line that would pass between the eastbound and westbound lanes towards the downtown. This was never built. The second reason was for their plan to redevelop the strip of available land on the north side, with 358 housing units, an elementary school complex, and a health clinic and shopping center. Not a single one of these structures were built, and the land remains mostly undeveloped to this day. So in 1974, they started on the Franklin-Mulberry Expressway that we see today, costing $100 million, which was $71 million over budget. And it flattened 900 homes, 60 businesses, and a school. It's worth noting that most of this demolition process took place before the final plan was even approved. So if for whatever reason the plan would have fallen through, they would have been completely out of luck. So after this 1.4 mile portion was built, they continued their attempt to secure the right-of-way through Leakin Park, but had no luck. In 1981, the I-170 project was abandoned, and the 1.4 mile segment that was already built was basically just left to rot. There was an attempt to get the highway extended southward, instead connecting to I-95 near exit 51, and the I-170 signs were even installed on the Franklin-Mulberry Expressway. But this plan fell through fairly quickly due to a lack of interest, and the signs were quickly removed. So that's probably a sadder story than you were expecting when you clicked on this video, and I'm sorry about that. But there are a few other things to talk about here that are a bit more enjoyable. Firstly, in 2010, an $8.5 million project took place to remove some expressway stubs from the west end, and they were replaced with more parking for the metro station. I honestly didn't know these existed until researching for this video, so apparently before 2010, the highway looked even more disgusting, with 3 unused ramps sitting there. The only street view is from 2008 and it's very blurry, but you get the picture that it looked barren and run down. It's not a great look. Now, the final thing is likely what would be the best ending to this story, as the city is currently in the second half of a 2-year study to close the highway to nowhere and replace it with a community-led option with the mission to reconnect neighborhoods in the west part of the city. Obviously, the city has other infrastructural issues to worry about, but it's very possible that within the next decade, the highway itself could be torn down and replaced with parks and green space. A fitting ending to a highway that originally had the mission of destroying a city park. So that's where our story ends. As far as the history of freeways in America goes, I see this as one of the biggest genuine hiccups out there. There have been highways that have cut through important and low-income neighborhoods across the country, but this is one of the only situations where I feel like they really just messed up fully and demolished blocks upon blocks of residential land for no reason. It's a really sad story. Thanks for watching.